We start by welcoming in Congressman Bill Johnson of Ohio, otherwise known in the D.C. swamp as flyover country and Trump country. Congressman Johnson is serving his fourth term in the House. He's also written a book on the national crisis surrounding fatherhood or fatherlessness, which we'll discuss. But first, Congressman, welcome to Liberty Nation Radio.
Great to be with you, Tim. Thanks for having me on.
Well, the pleasure is all mine. Now, as we said, you represent a heavily pro-Trump district. So as the left and right attack President Trump for his performance with Vladimir Putin in Helsinki this week, I'm interested in your take on the summit and what the president said and what you're hearing from your constituents about Trump and Putin.
There is no question about it. Vladimir Putin is a tyrant. He has been at the top or close to the top of the Communist Party in Russia for a very, very long time. Before that, he was the head of the KGB. So anybody that doubts Vladimir Putin's determination to be a dictator, a tyrant, should just look closely at his history. The truth of the matter is, though, I wasn't in the room when the two of them spoke, and neither was anyone else who suddenly finds themselves experts on the subject. And I think to bring this into focus, we have to go back and look a little bit at history. Look at Ronald Reagan's actions and how he managed to bring down the Berlin Wall and the toppling of the Soviet Empire. I mean, he would one day call the Soviets the evil empire, tell Mikhail Gorbachev to tear down the wall, and the next moment, he's got him out at the ranch in California having hot dogs and hamburgers.
Boy, that's a really good point.
He was an expert at relationship building, and we don't know what Donald Trump talked about with Vladimir Putin behind closed doors. And that's the task of the President of the United States, to conduct foreign policy. Where were those voices crying treason when Barack Obama said, hey, wait until after the next election and I'll have more flexibility?
Let's move on to the midterms because we have them coming up shortly. You and the other 434 members of the House and a third of the Senate are on the ballot. Trump has truly shaken things up mightily and seen the economy and jobs pick up substantially since he took office, while the left seems to be offering little beyond hatred of Trump. Are you among those who buy into the theory of a blue wave, or is that, like the widespread prediction that Hillary Clinton would win the 2016 election, more just wishful thinking by the left?
Never has there been a wave election when the economy was performing at the rate that it's performing today. We are at record lows for unemployment. We are at record highs for the amount of dollars that the American taxpayer is keeping in their pocket, the number of businesses that are now increasing wages, giving bonuses. When you look at the amount of wealth that has been created in our country since Donald Trump came into office, the number of regulations that have been peeled back, the emphasis on border security, the emphasis on regaining America's leadership role on the international stage, the rebuilding of our military, you name it, the progress that has been made and the amount of optimism that is out there. I think the American people said something in November of 2016 that far too many, both in the national media and on the left, have simply ignored. The American people said, we want to go a different way. We want America to be strong. We want the federal government to be limited. We want the federal government to take less from us. And Donald Trump promised to do those kinds of things, and they are responding to it. So that is a backdrop. I will tell you that I will be surprised. I will be terribly surprised if there's anything close to a blue wave, because I think the American people, at least where I represent, in the conversations that I have day in and day out in one of the most impoverished parts of our nation, along the Ohio River, where the average income is only about $35,000 a year, I can tell you that people are pretty excited about America's future.
We're joined by Congressman Bill Johnson of Ohio. Let's do a 180 and talk about a book you've written called Raising Fathers, which addresses the widespread problem of fatherless homes in this country. We have ample evidence, Congressman, that social pathologies, drug use, divorce, crimes, suicide all happen in far greater numbers among people who grew up in fatherless homes. Why is it that this epidemic of fatherlessness is not on the national radar screen, and what can we really do about it?
Well, I think one reason it's not on the radar screen of many people is because societally, Tim, it has become so easy in the world, in our country, and I'm more concerned about our country than I am around the world, but we'll just talk about here in the United States. It's become far too easy to just walk away from those responsibilities. You know, the genesis of this book came from a father, me, getting a phone call from my oldest daughter when she was a senior in high school, telling me that she was pregnant. And a lot of people tried to convince her to get an abortion. I was very, very proud of her when she stood up and said, no, that's not the way I believe, and she decided to have the baby. Now, I confess that I did not want her to have anything to do with the birth father. I saw that as a dead-end road for her. He had dropped out of school in the 9th grade, didn't have an education, struggled with his temper. I just didn't see him as able to help take care of my daughter or my grandchild. And so I tried to steer her away from that relationship, but she said, no, Dad, this baby deserves to know his father, and I think it's my responsibility to try and see if that can happen. And I'm going to tell you, Tim, after my grandson was born in 1996, almost immediately, I began to see a change in the birth father. He began to walk different. He began to talk different. He began to carry himself different. He and I became very, very close over the next 4 years. And in September of 2000, 4 years later, my daughter finally decided that he had proven himself, and so they were married, and I proudly walked her down the aisle. The following February 1st of 2001, a devastating fire ripped through their apartment complex. My son-in-law made my daughter jump out of a third-story window in order to save herself, and he was going to rescue my grandson and lower him down to her. Unfortunately, both my son-in-law and my 4-year-old grandson were both killed in that fire. And so as I began to try and make sense of this, I said, you know, every time there's a young girl out there, a young teenage girl that gets pregnant, there's a young teenage boy out there that's going to be a dad, and they don't have any idea how to process that. You got a lot of young people, a lot of children that are fatherless. And you hit the nail on the head. Their performance in school, their likelihood to get involved in crime, drugs, and just perpetuate this cycle of fatherlessness is an epidemic. So I wanted to start a national conversation, and so I wrote the book, Raising Fathers.
Well, Congressman, I really appreciate you sharing your personal story with us. We thank you for joining us and wish you the best of luck coming up in your attempt to seek a 5th term in office. Thanks for joining us.
All right, Tim. Thanks very much, my friend.
Congressman Bill Johnson from Ohio.